Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of Kidlit International. Today I have with me Karen, Holly, Chris, and Sarah. The usual gang. Michelle, unfortunately, is unwell, as is Josh, but we send them a big hug and they will be back with us soon. Um, so, tonight we are talking about the rise of the self publisher. Um, 20 years ago or so, self-publishing was frowned upon. Not so much today. It's become really, really acceptable. Um, all of you have done both traditional and self-publishing. So, um, Sarah, if we can start with you, what's your experience?
Um, so I had a very positive experience with self-publishing, but I think it's possibly the time that we were in. It was in lockdown in COVID, so not a huge amount was happening in the publishing world. So it was kind of the best time to break through. Um, it's been a lot of hard work, um, but it's definitely given me that platform to um, be traditionally published and then be able to kind of, pit the two against each other. Um, I said something recently on, I think, on my Instagram, which kind of really created a lot of chat. There was a publishing conference in the US, I think, about a month ago now, and it was all about disrupt and rise, and it was all about the self-publishers coming through. And the reason that they were discussing this was because it's come to light that the big publishers, the five big publishers that we all hear about, their business model is that 8 out of 10 of their books can financially fail. So as an author, 8 out of 10 authors, you get that big deal with one of the big five. Are you going to be on one of those business model trajectories where they've actually got the money ready for your book to fail? And it was a huge thing at the conference, and it just really put into perspective how the large publishing houses, as amazing as they are and as much exposure it is going to give your book, this is a business and something has to change. And I think equally alongside the self-publishers are the indie publishers, the indie publishing houses, and I've worked with quite a few, and a lot of these are just one women, one men bands. These indie publishing houses are effectively a publisher who's kind of taken that brave step to put this umbrella, this business over what they're doing, but effectively it's just one person, and they don't have the luxury of this business model of allowing your book to fail. If an indie publisher takes on you and your book, they need it to do well just as much as you want it to do well. So I think we're seeing the rise of the self-publishers, but we're also seeing the rise of the indie publishers. And actually, when you're with an indie publisher, you're almost on a very similar self-publishing journey, because you have to do a lot. You have to do a lot of marketing and promotion and collaboration, and you're aware of budgets, and so there's a lot going on. So I think the rise of the indie publishers have come from the self-publishing. So I think what's happened is, over COVID, over the pandemic, over the last 4 years, the rise of the self-publisher has come, but that's then elevated indie publishers. So I think that's kind of the middle ground where authors should be looking now, looking at those indie publishing houses, because that's where it's happening, and that's where there's more support coming in. So it's no longer seen, especially here, I mean, I'm in the UK, as second best. It is, to self-publish a book isn't your last resort anymore. So many people are doing it, and there's so many platforms that are accepting self-publishing books. There's the picture book makers, who are huge, and if you've got text and illustration, and you can put your book to picture book maker, it goes onto this big wall where publishers and people are looking for different books to publish. So there is this platform. Quite often agents now will be saying for their submissions for authors that they're looking for unpublished authors, so that's authors that have gone through a publishing house, but who have a little bit of an experience. Well, that is kind of, you know, self-published authors. So I definitely think there's more doors that are opening for self-publishers. Yes, I think there's probably still a little bit of snobbery around self-publishers in the industry. If you go to book conferences and publishing conferences, because they are wanting to support their publishers. And, you know, don't get me wrong, even though the big publishers have this kind of business model, it doesn't mean that the people working there, you know, the editors that you're going to be working with, sort of care any less about you and your book in that instance. But it is just a business model that they are working with, because that's what the market's dictating. So it's very interesting. I think it's just basically it's an open playing field now. So you can choose and actually do all three if you want, you know, go for the big publishers, go for the indie publishers and self-publish. I don't think any is the last resort at all anymore.
Yeah, I think you're quite right there, Sarah. Leave yourself open and see what happens, see what comes of it. Yeah. Chris, tell us about your experience.
Well, funnily enough, I wrote an article on this exact thing, looking at traditional publishing, hybrid publishers, and self-publishing. And kind of the way it ended up was hybrid publishing has died a death now. It's been squeezed out because you have many fantastic indie publishers who are really pushing books. And it's exactly as Sarah says. I have a friend, funny enough, his book was one of my top 3 books of last year. I absolutely loved it. And he did that through an indie publisher. That indie publisher has now merged with another publisher. So they didn't take his second book. So he's self-publishing the second book, which is even better. But the work he's having to put in with an indie publisher on the marketing side, especially, it is like being a self-published author. But you're also seeing a lot of very, very good companies who are offering which part of self-publishing would you like help with. So they're not saying, there we go, it's that much, and we do everything. It is literally, you need help with editing, it's that much, etc. So you're seeing self-publishers actually, and traditional publishers and indie publishers, they've pushed that hybrid model away. And I've actually been checking up recently on the websites of these hybrid publishers, and they're moving more to that. We'll offer different services to authors rather than being a hybrid publisher. But indie and self-publishing was always going to jump in as soon as Amazon decided to focus on it. They're too big a company not to. The problem you can have, and was for me, I found with a publisher, I didn't have anywhere near the control over, and particularly because it was my first, my little baby. And there was a learning curve for me as well. And I find the indie publishers are great at setting your expectation levels. The big traditional publishers really aren't. And there's part of me that goes, I wish I'd come into a publisher after I'd had 2 or 3 self-published books, because then my expectations would have been more realistic. And it didn't really, it happened the wrong way around for me. And I also think there's certainly a lot of the comments I see in book groups are people turning around and going, the publisher won't take me because I don't have 100,000 followers on Instagram or whatever, which, to be honest with you, if a publisher turns around and says that to you, they're not interested in your book anyway. So no. They're just for a quick hit. So that is a real red flag to always watch out for. The good thing about having self-published now, I've built up that network around me. So if I were to have another book that went down the traditional route, it will help the other books that I've self-published. And it goes back to that conversation we had a couple of series ago about building a brand and marketing, really. So it's great if on your first book you get a traditional contract, But sometimes actually getting that traditional contract further down the line is of greater benefit to you because you've got that brand. It's going to help sales of everything. For me, yeah, I would never turn down an offer from a traditional publisher if it looked right. I certainly wouldn't turn down an indie publisher because I do think, to be honest, that's the way the industry is going. You can't keep on having these huge top 5 publishers dominating and seeing that many failures and them actually end up surviving, because even the best-selling books aren't making the money that they were even 2 years ago. I'm seeing all over my feeds people like James Patterson, Jeffrey Archer, all these really well-known best-selling authors. They've had to take to social media just to increase sales, but book sales in general, thanks to the media telling us that none of us have any money, have really fallen off a cliff in recent times, and it's difficult for all of us. It is the slight downside to self-publishing in that you don't have that massive marketing push behind you, which obviously, if you've got £100,000 of marketing chucked at any product, it's going to sell more. So indie publishers and self-publishing, yeah, we still have to work hard on the side of it that we do. For me, the indie publisher helps because it means they can do the bits I'm not great at. So at the moment, I've got everything on Amazon, and that makes it very difficult to get things into bookshops. So an indie publisher can take care of that side that in some ways is the ego side. My book in a bookshop is what we all dream about half the time, and when we see it there, it really puts a smile on our faces. And indie publishers are the ones that are able to help you with that. If you're self-publishing, it's much, much harder. So yeah, for me, if any indie publishers that want to have a chat, I'm here. But for me, I'm just that kind of person. I don't think one of the top 5, I'm too much of a control freak. And handing everything over and saying, yes, it's yours now, I'd struggle with. But indie publishers allow you to get more involved because they need the book to succeed as well. And self-publishing, I'm a bit like Sarah on this. I'm a big advocate for self-publishing because it means you have the control. There are enough people out there that will always help. One of the great experiences of the last 3 years is I have had so many people helping me all the time. And then you start coming up with ideas to help other people, and the whole thing just snowballs. And the bigger issue I think we all have when we look at publishers, it's great saying, oh, I've got this advance, but actually if you look at the way the advance is paid out by the big publishers, you're on less than minimum wage most of the time. So it's very, very difficult to make money out of it, as it is with most books. So you do have to go, how much control do I actually want to have over my book? What are the benefits if it is one of the big 5? What are the benefits if it's an indie publisher who actually might be taking your book and putting it in exactly the right place rather than a sweeping marketing campaign that's a coverall? So I think for me, it's definitely indie publishers and self-publishing. That's what appeals to me. Obviously, people aren't going to turn down big advances. So the big publishers will still be there, but you can't run any business on 80% of our product is going to fail. At some point, that's going to bite. And it's something you see a lot of people complaining about who got these big contracts and going, what's happened to my book? And I think there's a lot of people out there going, I just can't give this entire side of it away. And going back to last week's conversation of illustrators, that is a difficult task to go, there's my book, but at least then you've got an illustrator creating a world around your book. If you go to one of the big publishers, they're not creating a world around your book, they're just trying to shift product because that's how they make their money. And so you're never going to have that same feeling of, this is my little baby, which is probably one of my weaknesses. I need to stop thinking of all the books as my little baby more than anything else. But yeah, for me, it's kind of, I love the fact that indie publishers are on the rise. I'm seeing so many more of them, and they're being successful. You've got enough self-publishing help companies that, for me, you can see the industry changing quite rapidly.
Karen, tell us about your experience having done both. Yep.
Well, I'm not published by a big publisher, so I can't really speak on that and about what they publish, what it loses or whatever. I'm not informed. But I
you're
do
full on at the moment into self-publishing with Shell Harbour. Tell us about that.
I think I really did it more like a lone wolf, and made my decisions myself and sourced my things myself. So it was, I find the hardest thing about it is not having a product. I have a top-notch product. It's for a niche market, so it's not, you can order it through my webpage, but it's not on Amazon or anything like that. We don't have a bookshop. So I've nearly sold my first print run myself, and that is a lot of work. And I'm probably going to do a second print run, and that'll do me. Because it's a lot of work to sell a book. But that is where I found I could work out everything, but I haven't worked out that having it online and selling it online. You can get it through my webpage, yes, but as far as other avenues, no. So that's what I find the hardest about it. So if you're with an indie, they have that covered, like what you were saying, Chris, and also the bigger publishers. But the bigger publishers, they still have to outlay a lot of money for a picture book. They want their picture books to be successful because they're putting a lot of money on the table. So I think when they sign a book, they are hoping it will be a success. They want it to be a success, but you don't have a crystal ball. You have a feel for a story, and you may think it's going to be the next big thing, and it flops. And then some obscure little book can be just something that people just go, wow, I love it. But like what Chris was saying too is, you can have a good product, but if nobody knows about it, that good product's not going to sell. So I don't know where you go with it. I do know it's changing. But for me, it's the story dictates what you do with the story too. No one was going to publish a book about Shell Harbour, but I knew there was a need for a book about Shell Harbour. I knew there was a need for a book like Home, and I hoped it would find a place, and I'm blessed that it did. Same with Feathers and Foxy, because you just hope your books find a home, but there's a lot of stories you write and you think they're great and they don't get anywhere. And that's the reality of being a writer. So if you're lucky enough to be published in whatever form it is, I think you should just celebrate it because you've got a story in the world and you're very blessed and it's special. Yeah, whatever form it is.
You've talked about it being really, really hard work. And I think, and we all know that it is. Can you just go into a little bit more detail for people who haven't done it? Well, what's the hard work? Can you give some examples of that?
You've got to have your feet on the ground. You got to be out. Like I went down and a girl in the coffee shop wanted to buy a book today. So I came home, I got a book, I went back down, and then you've got to talk, and you've got to, it's a lot of time. But if you don't do that, that's one sale you could have had. And that's the only way that that book's going to sell. And that's by word of mouth, that one. But that's what I mean. It's your energy and your time. And I've had 6 weeks off, and I'm like, oh, I've got to wind up again. I've got to start again. And I'm like, oh, do I really want to? And I go, well, who else is going to do it? No one.
Yeah.
Put the same effort into my other books. But I've been fortunate that I think this one's hitting the mark because it's hitting people locally and they connect to it so well.
Yeah. Local book, local story, local author.
You have to know your market if you're self-publishing.
Yeah.
And if you are indie published or published with a big publisher, you're relying on them to know the market and that your book will do well. When you self-publish, you're not relying on anybody but yourself. That's how it is. So you're hoping the publisher has that vision as well, but you have to do the work too. But I don't know that putting your book up on social media all the time translates to sales either. You might get lots of likes and people go, oh, I like your book, but that doesn't mean they're going to buy it.
Yeah.
It's a hard gig.
Yeah.
It's a hard gig.
I helped, one of my friends owns a restaurant, and the tourist season's just started in the last 2 weeks. So I've been going down in the evenings because he likes me speaking to the British tourists as an expat here, and it's great because that word of mouth, they start going. I was sat there actually writing the final chapter for the next book, and someone turned around and said, "Are you writing your memoir?" And I went, "No, that's the next one." And the whole conversation started. I know they've downloaded the 2 free books from my website so far, and they will go on and buy the books. But it is exactly what you say. Just continually hitting social media will not break the back of it. It is that getting out and talking to people. That's actually what generates the interest and what helps sell books. And it's amazing. This is why we all do school visits and everything else, because it gets that word out there far better than sticking it on Facebook or whatever. I always try and do a different social media tag before I do that. And yeah, you do. I have loads of people that go, yeah, we love this post. And then I look at my sales figures and go, well, you didn't like it that much, did you? And I think we all go through that. But when you get out there and talk to people, it makes a big, big difference.
It does. And sorry, that I was just going to say, the publishing world in Australia is so small, and the market is small, and there's a saturation of books, but also the bigger houses have big bases covered. They have the most book sales you're going to get are through schools, but they lock out the indies or the others. And if you're not on, what do you call it, Jennifer? There's a list, and the bookshops get it. And if you're not, as a little publisher, you're not on there and your book's not on there, they don't even know about your book.
Oh, there's a few different ones. Yeah. I have to make sure every time I upload a book, I have to make sure it's on James Bennett. That's a library service to schools. And I have to make sure it's on this other one, and this other one. Doesn't guarantee you'll get a sale from it, but you have to constantly just, check and double check that it's there and that it's still there. And yeah.
And that is something, they have a bigger house, but they have more responsibility with more books. They have the luxury of someone probably just dedicated to that area.
Yeah.
And as a self-publisher, you don't even know how to do that. And indie does. And then the big ones have a team.
Yeah.
And the reality is picture books are expensive and you need the sales to cover your costs. So I'm happy that I'm getting there with that. If I cover my costs, that was my goal. Yeah, because I self-published and I'm only selling locally, and that's still shifting a lot of books.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And
Sarah, I was just going to ask, like, you're big on Instagram, like going back to social media, and you constantly put your books out there. Do you think that works or doesn't work, or is it just another social media channel?
It doesn't create sales with people, as Chris said, looking at the photos and liking it and commenting. For me, it just widens the net with exposure for teachers and schools and publishers for foreign rights. So you do get those sales, but kind of like in a different way, and sort of more opportunities. So it's all kind of like swings and roundabouts. I mean, I think as a self-publisher, it's no exaggeration to say if you are gonna if you want to self-publish your story, you will have to get up every day and say to yourself, right, what do I need to do today to promote this book? And it really is, you know, as intense as that. And you got to look at your pre-launch and then your after launch, and you're kind of doing like 6 months after. Really, that's kind of the longevity of a book. But you are going to need that time, and time's luxury because, you know, we don't all have that, and we need to be working other jobs. But I think if you can get your head around how much work you're going to be doing, and I think if you have a clear plan, which I think Karen says it really well, you know, you either want to just get your story out there and you're going to just be covering your costs, then that's one marketing promotional route that you're going to have to start looking into. Go down that one. If you want your book out there for exposure, it's going to be a different route that you're going to be taking, because you're going to be using that to platform you as an author to get in with publishing houses for further books. So that's something else again. If you were looking to self-publish to make a lot of money, that's not going to happen. So you've really got the other two routes to take.
It could. In the lottery.
Yeah, if you were lucky, but it's no less enriching. Honestly, I do think people should definitely have it as an option, because it does bring so much more than the sales. But I get that it is a luxury. It is a luxury to be able to have that. But it's definitely a life experience that I think most people should.
Yeah.
If you have a book, sorry.
Holly, you've started writing some children's books, you're yet to publish. Do you think you'd go down the self-publishing road, or would you prefer the traditional?
You know, I think possible. I mean, I'm open to any of the options. If I was to self-publish one of them, it might be the first one. Kind of like as I chose to publish my self-help book, because the stories are so personal. And I think it's because the first one of each is just super personal to me. So that might lead me more to self-publishing. But again, I mean, I'm certainly not going to turn down the opportunity to work with a publisher. So.
Yeah. Okay, it's been another great conversation, but we need to end it there. The rise of self-publisher is certainly happening along with the indie publishing houses, and it's forever changing. The landscape is forever changing, and it's changing very quickly, so you have to really keep your eye on it. Thank you everyone again for your input tonight. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and I will talk to you all again next week.